Welcome to Parenting Stress, Struggles, and Strategies for Change. My name is Melissa Tandy. I'm the Director of Community and International Training at Ackerman Institute for the Family. We have 1 hour today with Judy Grossman. There will be time at the end for Judy to answer questions, so please feel free to put those in the Q&A box, which you should see at the bottom bar of your screen, and feel free to chat me and ask where that is if you need help with that. And I think that's all from me. I will turn it right over to Judy, who has wonderful full content for us today.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm thrilled to be doing this. It's a good time of year. School has started, transitioning is happening, and what I'm going to be presenting today is going from struggles to strategies. What can we do about it? So I'm going to share my PowerPoint. I will ask you to do a bit of self-reflection during the workshop, and you can put your comments in the chat for other people to see. So let's get started, and here we go. So I want to share with you very briefly what we're going to cover, because it's quite a bit. And the whole point is really thinking about yourself as a parent and your frustrations and the things that you know are your strengths and areas that are challenging. So this is really about your parenting practices and how that relates to your child's emotional well-being. This workshop is less about cognitive skills, academic performance, because quite frankly, underlying academic performance is a child's emotional health, social emotional health, and you can relate to that. That goes for adults as well. Your work performance, your ability to do household tasks and be in relationships are very much supported by how you feel emotionally. And we're going to be talking quite a bit about emotional intelligence. So we're going to start with stress. What's the context? And, what stressors are you experiencing? What stressors is your child experiencing? I happen to be a stress researcher who went from studying stress to studying resilience. And so we're going to talk about how do you really manage this stress? How do you build resilience and even turn that into positive transformation? Talk about social emotional learning. What is your parenting style? And then what I would say as the core of the workshop is self-regulation. And that's the parent's ability to regulate, to be able to self-soothe, be in control, and how you can co-regulate or help your child regulate so that they can pay attention, get along with other people, and calm down when upset. So let's begin. How are our children? Well, obviously I didn't put up happy faces for a reason. And that's because the evidence, the research is telling us that children are struggling. Not all children, and it's a continuum. But if we look at our social, political, physical world, there are so many stressors out there. The climate is and I don't mean the climate in terms of weather, just the political climate, the social climate. There are just so many factors out there that are creating angst in the world, across the world. And it's reflected in children. So, certainly we know that the pandemic was very stressful for children, but we're now experiencing after effects. And there are higher rates of anxiety and depression and suicidality and regression in terms of academics. So there is a lot of tension and a lot of worries. Let's just say worries. So I want to set the context as understanding the influence of stress on our behavior. Okay. And, I always say when I do workshops or I'm training people, to say you're stressed is not helpful. You want to be as specific as possible. What is the source of stress? Is it because you're a highly anxious person and just by nature you get easily stressed? Is it stress coming from your child's behavior or your child's health or your child's underperformance? Is it marital or relationship stress from the father, the mother? Family stress from other people in the family, work stress, neighborhood. These are all independent, and yet they flow from one to the other. So that if there's a lot of work stress and you walk in the door at the end of the at the end of the day, are you your best self? Or do you need time to transition so that you're fully present at home? Then we have different kinds of stress. So, those of us that are stress researchers, years ago in the 60s, we looked at stressful events. 9/11, which is very current, was a stressful event. Having a baby, getting married, moving. Events are time limited. They can have ripple effects. For example, the act of getting divorced could be the day you sign the paper. That's an event, but it certainly creates so many other changes and transitions and adaptations that are necessary. So we have a stressful life events. And as Melissa said, at any time, if you want to add anything in the chat, in terms of stressful events that you're going through, that's just nice to share. And again, it's confidential. Daily hassles sounds silly, but if you have one of those days where everything goes wrong, you forgot your keys, you're late for work, you forgot to give your child lunch, and on and on and on. It's a cumulative effect. And so at the end of the day, again, are you fully present, sensitive to others, and relaxed? Chronic stress is debilitating. It could be that you have a chronically ill child, or you have a chronic health condition. Your child has a learning disability, your child's on the spectrum. There's financial insecurity, poverty, inadequate housing, things that are unrelenting. And that really has long-range lasting effects, which we'll talk about. And now in the lexicon, we talk about toxic stress. So this really comes out of something called the ACE study, which was an enormous study with 17,000 subjects who were just typical going to primary care. And they looked at 10 stressors. They looked at mental illness in a family member. And the question is for people that go through this list of 10 things, did this happen to you, yes or no, before you were 18? So a parent with depression, a parent that was alcoholic or substance abuser, child neglect, child abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, domestic violence, a parent that's incarcerated, divorce. These things, again, it's not that one is worse than another, it's the number. So if you have, let's say, 3, 4, or more toxic stressors that you've experienced, we found that that has consequences, not just for emotional health, but physical health as well. And that's why everyone is very interested in this study and often reference this study, because having stress in your life, and it could be these toxic stresses, or it could just be ongoing cumulative chronic stress, that affects rates of asthma, chronic heart disease, obesity, every health condition, cancer, is related to the amount of stress that we experience. And that's because it affects our immune system, it affects the amount of inflammation in the body, and the fact that there are health consequences, physical health consequences from having experiencing too much stress has opened up the field for people in physical medicine to be interested in helping their patients manage stress. And when I developed a curriculum for parents, and a lot of it is about understanding where our stress comes from and how to control it, and how to cope with it. And you ask yourself 3 questions. Can I control this? Could I control 9/11? No. Can I control a miscarriage? Most likely, no. If this is something that I can control, then there's something I can do about it. Is it predictable? Things that are predictable, for example, childbirth or going into the military, or my daughter that went into the Peace Corps had all kinds of anticipatory training to help you feel more in control. And is it important? If you make a list of the things that are making you feel stressed, are there things on that list that really, quite frankly, if you took perspective, are not that important? So think about where your stress is coming from and be very specific. You might want to put it down on a piece of paper, because I'm now going to ask, how do you behave when you're stressed? Okay, we'll talk about your child in a minute, but what about you? When you're stressed, do you have physical symptoms? Do you get a headache? Do you get muscle aches? Do you get a racing heart? Do you have emotional reactions? Do you cry? Do you yell? Are you short-tempered? How do you behave when you're stressed? And here are 2 simple pictures just so you can appreciate how that affects the quality of parenting, right? So I see here that let's see if I can get the chat. Yes, okay. Okay, so you might want to put in the chat, just for people to share with one another, what your reaction is. How do you know when you're stressed? Sometimes you don't know that you're stressed. And, someone in the family might say, what are you so angry about? Why are you shouting? Or, somewhat a family member that has been more withdrawn. There are so many different reactions to stress. And it's all about knowing yourself and knowing your child. How does your child act when he or she is stressed? Do they get angry? Are they easily frustrated? Are they reactive? Are they quiet? How does your partner act when he or she is stressed? I know, and my family knows, I withdraw. I know other people in my family, one person in particular, gets angry at the source of stress, not at a person. So how do you behave when you feel stressed? And that's important because we're looking at the quality of the parent-child relationship. The other thing to know about stress, and again, this is background for our discussion today, is that cumulative toxic stress affects a child's developing brain, particularly in early childhood and then again in adolescence. And so we know that there are structural changes in the brain, that there are changes in terms of the size of some of the areas of the brain, like the hippocampus, which is related to memory, the amygdala, which is related to emotional responses, becomes much more reactive. So the more stress someone experiences, the more they're in a heightened flight response, sympathetic nervous system response, fight, flight, freeze. And if you're in that state continuously or quite often, you over time become more reactive to stress, and it takes longer for you to recover. Okay, so for example, I've done a project with children in foster care, not children, teenagers in foster care that have children. Okay, teenage moms in foster care. And when I learn their histories and I can appreciate the amount of stress they experience as children, young children in the foster care system, I can understand why they react so quickly, get upset so easily, and it takes longer to calm down. So it doesn't have to be as an extreme example, but what is the importance of this in terms of our discussion today? It's your job to monitor and buffer your child from stress as much as possible. That might be not arguing with your partner in front of the child because that's stressful. Okay, so you want to buffer. Let's say the child's having a lot of trouble in school. You want to have a conference, have a meeting to find out what is that source of stress? What is making your child upset at school, so that there can be a remedy. And again, there are lifelong consequences. So, I've been studying stress since the 60s, and we've learned every decade that the impact is much greater it's even much greater than our DNA, than our genes, because the amount of stress we have affects how genes are turned on and off. So I don't want to get too complicated, but I think that the message that I've shared is pretty direct. So think about this month. Think about something that's been stressing you out, a person, a situation, a condition that you keep experiencing. Just have one thing in mind. And then think about, how well are you managing this stress? How well are you coping? And how are you coping? Okay, and you might want to put in the chat what some of your coping strategies are. And we'll talk about that for a moment before we get into resilience. So pretty much everybody has some unhealthy coping strategies. Some are worse than others. It could be gambling, overeating, taking drugs, drinking too much. Again, some of these are more harmful than others. But let's talk about the healthy coping strategies. And we could do a whole workshop on this. I'm just really introducing you to many different ways of thinking about yourself, your child, and your family. We often forget that being physically healthy is very much related to being able to manage stress. If you're fatigued, if you are not feeling well, if you have health worries, if you have GI tract conditions, that affects your ability to cope. Some people, well, I would say pretty much everybody has some way to relax, to deal with stress. It could be being in nature. It could be a hobby. I do yoga. I find that very relaxing. You might play music. You might take a bath. You might go for a walk. So you might want to share some of your coping relaxation activities. They might be things you do by yourself or with other people. Change your behavior. Maybe you need to change your expectations. Maybe your child doesn't have to get all A's because he's a little bit, his foundation isn't strong enough yet in literacy skills. Maybe you need to manage time better. Maybe you need to change your thoughts. We can be pretty hard on ourselves. And as a family therapist, it's not uncommon for a child to say, I'm a bad boy, or I make my mommy angry, and so I'm not a good child, right? So we tend to have negative thoughts. They stick like Velcro more than positive thoughts that just sort of we hear it and it slides off. Human beings have a tendency, it was for self-preservation, to be aware of the negative and have an alarm system for danger. But that does not work so well in the 21st century. We really need to be able to calm ourselves. And if we have this negative script, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I can't do it, it's too much for me, that is going to wear us down. Same thing with your child, okay? You don't want to inflate your child's sense of self by saying, oh, you're great. No. But you can say, oh, you see how you were able to manage that? That was really hard, but you were able to deal with it. Okay? So it's about effort. It's about motivation. It's not necessarily about the end product, right? And the strongest, what we call protective factor or coping skill, is social support. Who do you go to? How often do you go? Do you feel you're burdening someone? Does your child feel that they can come to you? Support is a very, very significant coping strategy. And then we have protective factors. I'm going to go over some of these slides a little more quickly just because I'm aware of time. Resilience. Okay, I like the definition resilience is struggling well, because we all struggle, some more than others, sometimes in life more than others, some days of the week more than others. Life is a struggle. It is. And right now, with everything going on, with school shootings and flooding and political dissension and the amount of aggressiveness that we're enduring and observing, these are very, very difficult times. I mean, I am quite mature in my age, and I've never experienced anything like this. And I think about our children. I think about our young children. Certainly not mine. My children are adults, but young children having experienced people conversing with masks and not being able to read facial cues, and having drills in school about shooter experiences. We need to be resilient. So there are many other definitions of resilience, but basically it's the ability to overcome adversity and adjust, adapt. So it's really the process of adapting to sources of stress. So how resilient are you? Do you feel, I'm a little resilient? I get overwhelmed. I get down. It's just too much. Or you're extremely resilient. I can handle this. I'll get on top of this. I'll be able to figure it out. How resilient are you? Now, I have to say that that's not really a fair question, because we can be resilient in one situation and not another. I can be resilient in getting over work challenges, but if I have to deal with a health issue with my child, I'm not quite as resilient because worry comes in. Okay. And there is no such thing as a resilient gene. We build resilience through experiences. We want to build our children's sense of being resilient. And like everything, it's an interaction between genes and experience. Experience is really the quality of caretaking, the quality of parenting, and the context. And right now, our context is creating a lot of challenges. So it's something that can be learned, and we learn it through success experiences. That's why we want a scaffold. If our child is having trouble learning math, okay, and you want him to feel more confident. Confidence is related to resilience. You want him to realize with effort and with maybe some assistance from a parent or a tutor, he can learn and be grade level again. Okay, so it's really, I can handle this, I can get through it. And whenever I'm working therapeutically or, I'm working professionally, I always point out not only strengths that someone's able to do this. I mean, everyone has strengths and everyone has challenges. But if someone has been able to get through a difficult time, or wow, that was really great how you were able to become friendly again with Harry, because you weren't really getting along, and I know it was upsetting you, and you were able to become friends again. That's really wonderful. So that leads us into emotional intelligence. The term in the literature and in what's going on in schools in terms of curricula is social emotional learning. And that has to do with self-awareness. That's why I'm asking you to reflect while we're going through this workshop together. Know yourself, know your triggers, know what upsets you, know what your strengths are, know when you need to ask for help. You want your child to be able to do that. So you want to be self-aware. You want to be socially aware, to be attuned to others. You want to be attuned to your child. You want to be receptive. You want to be present. I'm going to say that again and again. How often are we with our child and we're not present? We're looking at the phone. We're thinking about something else. We don't even have eye contact. We're in a restaurant. Everybody's on their phone. Are we fully present? You need to be present for another person, for them to feel heard and seen and understood. And then their term self-management is what I call self-regulation, which we're going to talk about. So social emotional learning starts at home. Think about your family. How easily do you talk about feelings? Do you allow people to talk about feelings? Do you encourage people to talk about feelings? Do you share your feelings? Because I'm going to be using the term emotional coaching in a minute. The first step in social emotional learning is to know how you feel, for your child to know how he feels. You have to be able to do that before you can understand how someone else feels, before you can have empathy, before you can take perspective. So the first step is the ease at talking about all different kinds of feelings at home. Are some feelings okay to talk about, but some are not? Is it not okay to share when you're sad? Is it not okay to demonstrate anger? So you are the role model, whether your child is 2, 10, or 20, or 40. You are the role model for social emotional learning. And there's some very nice work and some videos, if you want to look up Dr. John Gottman, about emotional intelligence and how parents have different feelings, or what he calls meta emotions. How do you feel about feelings? And he identifies 4 types. And I think this is important to see where you recognize yourself. Are you a dismissive parent where you ignore how the child feels because you're uncomfortable? Oh, that's not so bad. Just be happy. You don't have to worry about that. You dismiss the feeling. And that feels terrible to the person that has a real feeling. Feelings are real. Feelings come and go, but they affect us not just in terms of how we feel, but how we think and how we behave. So dismissing a feeling is really making the child or the other feel shame for feeling a certain way, or feeling that there's something wrong with them, or the parent doesn't get them, the parent doesn't care. And, how often do we say, oh, it's not such a big deal, just get over it? Some parents are disapproving, which brings in the critical aspect. So not only do you dismiss how the child feels, but you judge it. You say, you shouldn't cry. Boys shouldn't cry. It's wrong. Boys shouldn't be afraid. Stop being so angry. You shouldn't be angry. What message is that? The message is there's something wrong with being angry. No, there is not something wrong with being angry. Everybody feels anger. It's how you behave. It's how you demonstrate anger. It's what you do with your anger that can be a problem. A little child is angry at his sister because she keeps bothering him, taking his things. That's normal. Should he hit her? Of course not, right? So you can validate, I understand that you're angry. You have a right to be angry. I would be angry too if my sister kept taking my things. But you cannot hit her. It's not okay to hit her. Let's think of what else you can do. The laissez-faire parent, everything's okay. You just let the child act and do as they please. You don't really monitor. You don't really set limits. And, there are 2 aspects to parenting. There's love, affection, caring, taken care of. Children need that. But they also need limits, boundaries, clear expectations. These go hand in hand, right? Too much, oh, I love you, I love you. Oh, okay, you want another cookie? That's fine. Or, no, the rule is absolutely never a cookie. That's not balanced either. I want you to be an emotional coach. An emotional coach is someone that we're going to look at more specifically, but you want to validate how the child feels, be non-judgmental, and encourage the child to talk about the feeling. For example, whoops. Oh, I have to go backwards. Okay. This is what an emotional coach does. First of all, as the parent, you always want to be aware of how you feel. Tune in, take a breath. before you respond, just check in. Am I calm? Am I irritable? What's going on with me? And then you want to be able to name, label how your child feels. Now, if it's an older child, or even some young children as young as 3 or 4, say, it looks to me like you're angry. I'm looking at your face and you look angry to me. Is that how you're feeling? Is that right? So you don't want to tell the child how he feels. You want to ask, right? If the child doesn't come up with like, oh, I see you've been trying to do that puzzle for so long. I mean, I don't know, how are you feeling? Are you feeling frustrated? So you want to build an emotional vocabulary, and the vocabulary becomes more and more sophisticated as a child ages. So you name the feeling, you listen and connect, and you let the child tell the story of why they feel like that. I'm upset because the teacher said that I was talking too much, and I wasn't really talking too much. I was talking to Johnny next to me because he was asking me a question, and the teacher's not fair, and this isn't right, and I didn't do anything wrong. Listen, validate. I hear what you're saying. You feel that the teacher wasn't fair because Johnny was asking you a question, you were answering. I get that. So you're empathizing, you're validating. And then the next step would be to help the child problem solve. Gee, I wonder, do you think that you should let the teacher know? Or do you think if this would happen again, that you might want to do something about it? Or is there any way I can help you? So the last step, which here says control big feelings, which is self-regulation. Another part of being an emotional coach is getting to the stage of problem solving. And problem solving can start with even very young children. It's a lifelong skill, and it's about process. It's not about the end product. It's about, if we were to redo this, if we were to rewind, what could you do differently? What other options do you have? Let's figure out what to do instead. I know you hate doing your homework, and unfortunately, it's required that you do your homework. So let's figure out the best plan, the best time of day. What can we do to make homework less stressful for you? So before we get into self-regulation, which is when someone has very intense, we call them big feelings, but very intense feelings, and they erupt easily. Young child has a lot of temper tantrums, screaming, yelling. We want to understand a child's behavior when it's challenging for you as the parent or for the family. Even it could be upsetting even for the sibling. So what you see is really the top of the iceberg. It's behavior. It's the child throwing something. It's the child screaming, I hate you. It's the child hitting someone. It's the behavior that is just a small piece of what's going on with that child. We want to understand what's underneath the behavior. What is causing the child or the adult to act that way? Okay, so the last part of this webinar, and I want to leave enough time for questions and answers, but we will get into emotional regulation. But what could be causing this irritability in your child, or the aggressiveness, or the sadness, or the child being non-communicative, or the child withdrawing, staying in their room all the time? Could they be having challenges with peers? Very upsetting. Maybe they need to do some problem solving with you? Are they reacting to the family climate? Is there a lot of tension in the family? Are there a lot of arguments? Are people isolated from one another? Is there laughter at home? Does the child sense the parents' level of frustration? Children are uncanny in how they can absorb how a parent feels. It's not cognitive, right? We're not talking at all today about cognition. We're not talking about executive function skills. We're not talking about how the child does in science. We're talking about the things that are important to get along in life. So family tension does affect everyone in the family. Does the child have lagging skills? Are they very stressed and frustrated because academically they're not achieving? Maybe they have unidentified ADHD and they're easily distracted. Maybe they have sensory issues where they're have a low threshold and they're overstimulated by things going on in the environment, or the noise in the classroom is too loud, or the overhead lights are bothering them. Do they have an unidentified learning disability? So if you are interested in lagging skills, you can look up Russ Green, who has some wonderful videos and material on lagging skills. There's so many different areas of development. There's language, there's gross motor, there's fine motor, there's cognitive. Children are not necessarily age appropriate in all areas of development, right? So they may have some lagging skills. Certainly executive function skills, which are the higher cognitive skills of judgment and goal setting and decision making, they don't develop fully until a child's late 20s. So, we often expect a teenager to have good judgment, to not do some of the antisocial acts that they might do, or some of the behaviors that are not so healthy. But you have to remember, their brain is not fully developed. Child might just be not feeling well, right? When you're not feeling well, are you your best self in terms of how you relate to everyone? They might be hungry or fatigued. I really stress fatigue and how that affects children's behavior. So last topic, self-regulation. Okay. So if anyone, you, your child, a family member, a close friend, is having big feelings, whether it's depression, grief, anxiety, anger, how do we manage these feelings so they don't take over, right? So how do we calm down? Well, I'm going to go through quite a few different techniques. Simple ones are belly breathing, different kinds of movement, chill out space. And I'm going to talk about it in terms of someone's arousal level. So if we look at what we could call a feelings thermometer, going from just right, which is 5, which means I'm calm, I'm focused, I'm paying attention, I'm present, to I'm sort of tuned out, I'm low energy, I'm preoccupied, I'm bored, which would be going down from 5 to 1, to I'm getting upset, I'm annoyed, I'm getting a little angry, I'm really irritated and angry, I'm ready to explode. Okay, so there's an arousal curve. So here we're getting upset, and we're getting more and more angry, and we've reached our threshold and we become dysregulated. Okay, we're upset about something, and that at some point we get dysregulated. The dysregulation is where you see the explosion, where you see the behavior of acting out. Okay, so this is what we want to focus on. Having your child and you recognize as you get aroused, you know, do you have physical sensations? I'm getting tense. Is the volume of the person talking to you getting louder and louder? Is your arousal going up and up until I'm so upset about this, you get dysregulated. And the dysregulation looks like difficult behavior or unacceptable behavior. I often use this in my therapy practice to help. It's sort of a graphic to help people see where they're at. And we fill in the spaces and talk about if you're an 8, how are you going to get down to a 6? What are you going to do? This is what you can do. So we identify your arousal level or your child's arousal level. And if they are too aroused, you want to downregulate. But some children, if they're very slow moving, takes forever to get out the door, you want to upregulate. Okay. So some of the things we can do are sensory motor activities. These have to do with, I don't want to get technical, but the vestibular and the proprioceptive systems, where any kind of resistance, swinging, resistant activities, like doing a push-up is a resistance activity. And that gives input to your muscles and joints and tendons, and it calms the nervous system, right? Lifting weights. I mean, there are many, many different kinds of resistance activities. Pushing something, holding heavy books, wearing a weighted vest. All of these are sensory motor activities, and they calm the nervous system. Movement, aerobic activity is excellent for self-regulation. Any kind of gymnastics, which also brings in resistance. If you're on the bars and you're hanging, that's resistance. Swimming, anything that involves start and stop, that has to do with self-regulation. Can you start and stop? Simon Says, red light, green light. If you were not well regulated, you would just be running and it would be hard to stop, right? Or a child that throws a ball, but they throw so hard, they can't regulate the force. Mindfulness activities, breathing, number one. I start doing breathing activities in my therapy practice with kids as young as 2 and 3. There are many different kinds of breathing techniques. You might have questions about that. I don't want to go into too much detail. Progressive relaxation is sometimes easier for younger children, where you tense a body part and release, just because you're focused on something and you're paying attention. Visualization, body scan, that's lovely to do when your child's going to bed. Let's relax the top of the head, relax your eyes, relax your shoulders, and go through the body. Or self-soothing activities, drawing, writing, reading. These are some of the same things that we talked about when we talked about coping skills. There are also more cognitive behavioral strategies for self-regulation. I've never used timeout. It works for some parents, never worked for me. I like chill out because you're teaching something. Chill out means you need time to calm down and to regulate. And how are you going to do that? Do you have a bunch of stuffed animals that you want in a special corner? Or do you have a real pet that you want to come and sit on your lap? Are there certain kinds of quiet games that you like to play? Do you want to put on earphones, listen to music? Problem solving. Let's rewind. Let's write a new story. Next time this happens, what are we going to do? Right? I was working with a parent with her child, and he wanted a chill out space. And so they did problem solving and came up with what they were going to use, came up with a tent, what they were going to put in it, when he would go there, why he would go there, and so forth. Positive self-talk. But the bottom line, what I'm sharing today is you are the role model. You can say to your child, I'm getting really upset. I'm getting very frustrated. I know that it'll help me if I just take a couple of deep breaths. Or I'm about to scream. I'm a number 9. I don't want to go there. I know I need to go get a glass of water and take a minute to calm down. Okay? So, in the last minute, I just want to summarize. And if any of you would like this PowerPoint, I'm sure Melissa would be happy to send it to you. I'm just going to mention a few things here. Always acknowledge strengths. It's so easy to get stuck on what's not working right. And be as specific as possible. Not, oh, you're great you're a great cook. You're really a wonderful cook when you plan the meal, like when you made the pancakes this morning for us. Be specific, give examples. Increase grit. Persistence. If you find that your child has low frustration tolerance, you want to work on that. And as their persistence increases, you want to comment on it. I saw you were struggling, but you were able to stay with that problem in your homework another 5 minutes. That's great. That's great that you were able to do that. And for the parent, don't react. You want to respond. React means it's instantaneous. You're not taking time to think through, to know how you're feeling, to be aware of what you want to say, to get down to your child's level, to be clear in what you're saying. A lot of parents say too much. Simple. Just respond in simple terms, in short sentences. Don't go on with long explanations. The child will get lost. And again, you can read this on your own, but be present. If I were to do some research on the percent of time parents are fully present with their child, what do you think the changes would be over time from a decade ago to now? Also, pay attention to the co-parenting relationship. Be compassionate with yourself. Parenting is very hard work. Parenting demands a lot from us. So in order to do a good job, take care of yourself. Okay? And this webinar is really about relationships and connection. So although I know parents are very concerned about their child's school performance and does he have friends and I want him to be happy, the latest stance I would say is you can never really talk about any kind of academic performance or just general achievement without addressing social emotional learning. So, having said all that, Melissa, do you want to share some questions for me? And I'd be happy to respond.
First, I would like to share appreciation. Thank you so much for your time, Judy. There's a bunch of gratitude in the chat and in the Q&A. And thank you. As we switch into Q&A, would you mind bringing up your PowerPoint again? There was a request to see the protective factors slide again. And as you do that, I will read one of the questions. The question is, can you speak to the best actions to take when in the moment and emotional stress is high? Breathing activities seem to work best. Are there any others?
Okay, just a word about protective factors. Those of us that are stress researchers, it's easy to talk about stress, but the protective factors are those factors that mediate the amount of stress you have. So, what to do in the moment? Well, one of the best things to do is pause. Now, if you're talking about yourself or your child, my answer will be a little bit different. For the parent, it's pause. With the child, sometimes the best thing to do in the moment, if the child is in the middle of, what should I say, their prefrontal cortex is offline, meaning their thinking mind is not working. They're totally in a lower level in terms of brain functioning, and it's just reactive. You can start breathing for the child. That may sound silly, but if you lower your voice and if you start, or I find something that's very helpful is stretching. So, let's say your child's really upset. And again, if they're in a full-blown temper tantrum or rage, there's not much that you can do except create safety and just be present and say, I'll wait, because it will end. For some children, it goes on a really long time and it's scary for a parent. And, it's best to practice these things when the child is not in this reactive state. But stretching is very helpful, and shaking the body. When we don't have perspective and it's in the moment, bodily strategies tend to work best. Talking, language, that's not going to help, or pushing, or a very tight hug, depending on, if your child will allow that in the moment, or if the child will allow a hand on the back. So again, it's very frustrating when a parent feels helpless because the child is in a state where there's not much you can do to calm down the child. You can show the child how you're calming yourself, but the child has to have some openness to receiving your message about how to calm. When the rage or the tantrum is over, you can say, next time, let's try this, let's practice this. So next time when you're so upset and I can give you a cue, you can try this. I hope that helped. Another one, Melissa?
I was just going to say, I think that tip would help in the workplace probably, and in our grown-up lives too.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I think we're just out of time, so we'll have to leave it there.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, I hope that you have something that you're taking away. I do find that people that go to workshops, if you can actually say to yourself, as you're turning off the screen, one thing I learned, or one thing I'm going to practice, or one thing I'm taking away is, you'll integrate it more. So
That's an excellent tip.
joining.
And we had someone in the chat just say thank you, and that they found themselves relaxing as they learned. So
Good, wonderful.
that's a good start.
You also learn more when you're relaxed.
Ah, great. Thank you so much, Judy.
Okay.
And thank you everyone for being here.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.